Good evening, everybody. Welcome into Sunday Night Live here on To The Point. Lots to react to. It was a fun weekend. Lots happening in the world of sports. UFC 296 last night in Las Vegas, Nevada. We will talk about that in depth. Some interesting NHL results, some injuries, some things to look forward to, certainly with the Christmas break coming up in a few sports, some time offs. We'll have just a couple days before we get there. But it was an interesting day in the NFL world, as it has been all season long. You're watching and you're trying to figure out, as I say this every week, who's good here, what teams are threatening, who should we believe in. A story as old as time, the Dallas Cowboys are somebody that people want to believe in. They are loved, they're hated, they're polarizing, America's team. Although, if they are America's team, they're about as successful as Colby Covington in showing it. They haven't won a championship since 1995. They have been close, but no cigar, and you're watching the last month of the season, and you're thinking the Dallas Cowboys can do it this year. I even started to believe in it after looking at a watered-down NFC and a watered-down NFL, quite frankly, where teams are all the same and you have a few above the rest, but you're looking at a product that is eerily similar. But you get the Cowboys winning at home, beating the Eagles, beating the teams that they should beat. Huge win on Thanksgiving. And we get to a game today where the Dallas Cowboys head on the road for the first time in a while to play the Buffalo Bills. The Buffalo Bills, who have gone through their own trials and tribulations this season. Was Sean McDermott going to be fired earlier in the year? He had a speech brought up that he made in 2019 that was resurfaced recently. Lots of injuries on the back end. Josh Allen having an interception in 9 straight games, which tied a modern record. But they're on the come up. They go to Kansas City. They beat the Chiefs. They had a tough game with the Eagles that you could argue they should have won. They have looked better as of late. Two teams that are feeling good, playing good in Orchard Park, New York. And today it was one-way traffic. It was a beatdown, and the Buffalo Bills punched the Dallas Cowboys in the face, and the Dallas Cowboys had no answer for that punch. It was a jab, 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 and again, they couldn't block it, they couldn't defend it, they didn't know what to do with this style. Buffalo out-toughed Dallas. Buffalo out-game planned them. And I give credit to Joe Brady, to Sean McDermott, and most of all to the ego of Josh Allen to not change a game plan that was working. From the opening drive, which Buffalo got the ball first, they ran it down the Cowboys' throat. Play after play after play. In between the tackles, James Cook, Johnson, Latavius Murray, Josh Allen, it did not matter. Buffalo could run the ball for over 5 yards a clip. To this point, because the game was still ongoing when I started recording this, the game was out of hand, so I started early. James Cook was running for an over 6 yards per carry clip throughout the entirety of the game. And normally, in years past, the Dallas Cowboys would deviate. They would change the approach. The Buffalo Bills would change the approach. Oh, we're running so effectively. We're doing this. Well, let's throw the ball down the field because Josh Allen's got a cannon of an arm, and that's how we win football games. But today they did not. And actually, James Cook today, 25 carries for $179. That's 7.2 yards per clip. all career highs. Also had a rushing touchdown. But Buffalo ran for over 200 yards, almost 250 yards rushing to this point. And they have 3 carries on the ground. They figured it out. Josh Allen only threw the ball today 15 times. He did not throw for 100 yards. But they didn't turn the ball over. They didn't make any massive mistakes. And this won't be every week, because you won't have this much success running the football on every opponent. But they knew they could do it, and they did not. Josh Allen, like any athlete, has an ego. And he knows he has a big arm, and he knows he can throw the football down the field, and yet he stuck to the plan. They continue to do it. And Dallas has a good defense. Today you might say, oh, they're not very good. The weakest part of the Dallas Cowboys are their linebackers. Micah Parsons is listed as a linebacker, but he's not a linebacker. He's an edge rusher. He doesn't cover anybody, and he doesn't stop the run all that effectively. With Leighton Vander Esch being out, missing Clark in the linebacking core, it is weak. They don't tackle very well. That's why Dallas wanted Darius Leonard. It was between Philly and Dallas, and they both needed him. Getting to that second level, they were not tackling right away. James Cook was getting extra yards. That's why he averaged 7 yards per carry today. Time after time after time, they continued to do it to a whole lot of success. The Bills have the players to be a great team. Stephon Diggs only had 48 yards receiving today. He dropped a few passes. Dawson Knox, Dalton Kincaid, doesn't matter. Their offensive line mauled the Cowboys' defensive line and their linebackers. A physical group that took it to Dallas, and they did not know what to do with it. Dallas went on the road to Buffalo and didn't know what to do. Dak Prescott was under siege the whole day offensively. They weren't any more successful. They just scored a meaningless touchdown, CeeDee Lamb. Great. Add one to the stat sheet, make you feel better about yourself. Happy about that. But Dak threw for $134 today, threw an interception, sacked 3 times. He was under siege. Greg Rousseau, Ed Oliver, Von Miller, briefly. That offensive line, when Zach Martin left, but for most of the day, that was a theme in the NFL. The offensive lines are getting killed. They couldn't do anything. He's off target. He got the benefit of getting a couple calls for roughing the passer that, quite frankly, were bullshit. They didn't rough the passer. He broke the plane. He was running, but they gave him the call because you got to protect the quarterback, because player safety trumps all. And who isn't on board with that? But they had nothing. A late garbage touchdown to make it 31-10. But we know the truth. It's a blowout. It's domination, Holmes. This result is huge. Buffalo improves to 8-6. They need to win this game because of the results of Saturday football, where the Indianapolis Colts edged the Steelers, and the Cincinnati Bengals, led by Jake Browning, beat the Vikings in overtime. Colts 8-6, Bengals 8-6, Bills 8-6. They need to continue to win games and hope that these teams in front of them stub their toe and lose a game, because they do not control their own destiny right now. They need to win every game to remain in the mix. And today was, to me, the hardest opponent they have left on their schedule, and they won it. Because they play Saturday against the Chargers, And the Chargers played on Thursday night in that abomination of a football game. And finally, the Chargers fired Brandon Staley. It was a long time coming, to quote Gord Downey. He should have been fired after the playoff game last year where they led 28-0 and they lost to the Jags. He's not a head coach. He's a coordinator, which is fine. Defensive with the media. His defense had no life. That team quit on him in about the first quarter, and the Raiders had 0 points. The prior week, they put up 62 against Brandon Staley. That's a whole other story. Bills get the Chargers. They get the Patriots. And they finish at Miami. They might not be favored in Miami, but they probably should be. They beat Miami by 30 points earlier in the season. And quite frankly, I still don't trust the Bills because, again, they fail every time you see something. That's the thing. But I have to look at them right now and say they're playing great football, and they might be peaking at the right time. Josh Allen is doing what he has to do. They have a great running back. They have a great offensive line. Their defense is solid. And teams around them are starting to dip, starting to come apart while they're together at the seams. I believe the Bills are going to win their next 2 games. They'll beat the Chargers, and they lost to the Patriots earlier in the year. I think they'll redeem that loss. Probably won't be easy, because despite the fact that the Patriots stink on offense, and they've had their problems, their defense comes to play every week. They battle hard. They intercepted Patrick Mahomes twice today. They kept that game close, even when it shouldn't be. They compete. It'll come down to that Dolphins game. And how important of a game is it going to be for the Miami Dolphins? I think it's going to be important. Because here's the thing. Dolphins got the Cowboys next week in Miami on Christmas Eve in the feature game on Fox. Not an easy opponent. Not a gimme victory by any means. Tough game. And Dallas will be reeling from this loss and pissed off in all likelihood. And it's not easy for Dallas because you go from one coast, you go from the cold of Buffalo to the heat of Miami. So you got to get ready for that. But Dolphins, to close out their season, with a wounded Tyreek Hill who did not play today, and an offensive line that's questionable. They got Dallas, Baltimore, Buffalo. I don't know if they win any of them. I don't know if they win any of those games. Tough games. They could win all 3. They could lose all 3. Neither of those results would surprise me. But my point here is Buffalo at 8-6. They win their next 2 games. Even if Miami loses 1 of their next 2, Buffalo still will have the possibility to win the division. That last game of the season could be a division-defining game. Buffalo would have 2 head-to-head victories over the Miami Dolphins. Dolphins currently are in a good spot. They still believe that they could win the AFC, which hypothetically they could, but they're 10-4. Need to keep pace, need things to go your way. A lot of things can happen. A lot of different things that can transpire. To me, the Bills are still a threat to win the AFC East. They're peaking at the right time. They seem to have more of an understanding of who they are as a football team. With Josh Allen, yes, he's great, but being reckless and great gets you nowhere. They're a focused group. And today was a statement victory. Yes, it's a home game, but it doesn't matter. You got to find a way to win these games, and they did. And it wasn't close. They took it to the Cowboys. For Dallas, this will spark the conversation. Well, the Cowboys get too much chatter. The Cowboys are discussed too much. They get discussed a lot, so people think they're better than what they are. There could be some truth to that. I think I've had this talk with all of you before. I think all the teams that are quote unquote the most popular in every sport get talked about too much. The Toronto Maple Leafs get talked about too much. The Dallas Cowboys get talked about too much. The New York Yankees get talked too much. It's all true. And oddly enough, those teams that get talked about so much never win. But that's another story for another day. So do the Cowboys get a lot of coverage? Do they get clicks? Certainly. But I believe this season it was warranted. I started to believe in this team. I never thought they were better than San Francisco. But do I still believe at their best that the Cowboys are better than the Philadelphia Eagles? I do. Dak Prescott was playing at an MVP level until today. He was basically, he's a vehicle. He didn't have a starter, he didn't have brakes, he had nothing. He couldn't go anywhere today. No success for Dak Prescott. So where does it go from here for Dallas? They need to be prepared for teams to run the ball on them. And they need to be more tough as a football team. They have a lot of bravado. They have a really good defensive coordinator in Dan Quinn. And not every offensive line is as physical as Buffalo. But what I will say is they got Detroit in a couple weeks, and Detroit's offensive line is like this when they're at their best. We saw Detroit on last night destroy Denver. Their offensive line can maul you when provoked. When they want to play great football, they will whoop your ass. And Buffalo's can as well. San Francisco is a different type of offensive line, but Christian McCaffrey is a lot like James Cook, where he's shifty, he can run between the tackles, and he's just a touchdown machine. Dallas has to look up and go, okay, we're going to make the playoffs. We know this. And we'll be a big favorite in a wild card game if we do not win this division. Which they might not, because they got Miami at Detroit. Then they finish, I think, with Tommy Cutlets and the Giants. Or maybe Washington. It's one of those shitty NFC East teams. But we need to be prepared to play the best. We need to be prepared to deal with this. There was a report this morning. Jay Glazer, I think, made it. And Jay Glazer's a great reporter. That the Cowboys were sick. They had a lot of players sick. You're seeing this coming up. A lot of guys are sick this time of year. The Toronto Maple Leafs had, half their team was sick this week. It happens. One thing I'm grateful for is it's sick. You don't have to hear that it's COVID and players have to sit out. Thank fuck that is over. But they were sick. And we've all been sick. Doing things when you're sick sucks, and you're not as productive, and you're not as good, and it's probably not as good an effort. And maybe Buffalo caught Dallas on the right day. Because they're all under the weather, and that could be true. I still really like Dak. I love CeeDee Lamb. Jake Ferguson is a stud. that play action, run game mix that we see, putting CeeDee Lamb all over the field, I think that will work. But Dallas's offensive line has to be more cohesive. Their linebackers have to tackle somebody. They have to be prepared to play a physical team. Today's game can be one of two things. It can be a sign of things to come, or it can be a wake-up call. Because the Cowboys can look ahead and say, that's San Francisco, but better. San Francisco can play the exact same game the Buffalo Bills did, except Christian McCaffrey might be the MVP of the league. He's better than James Cook. Trent Williams is better than Mitch Morse. To me, when you're one of these best teams, it's not about our seeding, and especially this year. Because in these selective conferences, in particular the NFC, I don't think there are many landmines. What I mean by that is, I don't think there are teams that fear you in the wild card. I don't think you should look around and go, oh, that team, we can't get them. That's a bad matchup, this, that, or the third. You have to look up and go, how can we beat San Francisco? How can we beat Philadelphia again? How can we beat Detroit if they play like they did last night? Those are the four. And I even think Detroit is a tier lower than the other two I just mentioned. Do the Rams present a fear if they can get in? Sure. But they don't run the football that well. And Dallas wants their opponents to drop back and throw the football 30 plus times a game. That's how they win. Parsons, Gallimore, Dorrance Armstrong, DeMarcus Lawrence, pressuring the quarterback, coming at you. That's how they play their best. That's what they want their opponents to do to them. It leads to the most success. So the Rams, who I think would put some fear in the Eagles, might put some fear in the Detroit Lions. I don't think it does that same thing for Dallas because it's a different matchup. It's a different style that you play. You don't want to look too far ahead, but you need to be confident enough to look ahead, if that makes sense. You have 3 games left, and they're all difficult opponents, certainly. Miami Dolphins next week, they can run the football as well as anybody. Devon Achane, Raheem Mostert, who got up to 20 touchdowns in the season today. They can run the ball, but it's a different style of running game than Buffalo. They do outside runs. They do jet sweeps. They're very creative in how they run the football. I think it helps Dallas next weekend. Team running the football down your throat, play after play after play, and it's demoralizing as well. It hurts you to see play after play, and you can do nothing to stop the onslaught. So for the Dallas Cowboys, they need to look in the mirror and go, where are we going? Is it a wake-up call or a sign of things? When the going gets tough, when we're playing a team that can present the same style and beat us in the same way, how do we react to this? What do we do to counteract this? What's our approach? If they do not make adjustments, they will lose in the playoffs. They won't be in the Super Bowl again. But to me, Dallas is still a very tricky opponent. Today was a bad day, certainly. They need to make adjustments. They need to play better. But they have an opportunity to beat a good team on the road next weekend. You head to Miami, Christmas Eve, live on Fox. Christmas Eve, full slate of games. I'd love to take the credit for that, which I'll take some. Doesn't hurt that Christmas Eve falls on a Sunday. I will say that. That does, coincide. But I have been pitching this idea for some time, I will say. I thought it was a fantastic idea to do it. To have full slate. Used to have a bowl game on Christmas Eve, none this year. Because college football is not going to go up against the NFL. Just smart. Because you're going to lose. But hey, I like what they're doing when it comes, that there's a full slate of games. And Dallas and Miami is certainly one of the best of the day. No doubt about it. But it's a big moment for the Cowboys moving forward. Dolphins win today, 30-0 against New York Jets. No Tyreek Hill, but Raheem Mostert, I mentioned, had 2 touchdowns. Tua was solid. The offense didn't have to play great, but Tua only had 3 incompletions. They ran the football effectively. They made some plays down the field, but they went through the game. That's how I would describe it. They did what they had to do, and they dominated. Bradley Chubb had 3 sacks, forced fumble, 6 hits on the quarterback, and the Jets, fresh off the massive performance from Zach Wilson against the Texans, he lasted a half. He left the game with a head injury, but it was not concussion protocol related. So to me, that signaled they didn't want him to play anymore. If he had a head injury and it's not a concussion, what do you have, a bruise? Bruise on the top of his head? They didn't want to say bench again because they've already done it a couple times over his career as a Jet. But for the day, for him, he went 4 for 11, 26 yards, got sacked 4 times, got hit 10 times, and lost a fumble. Trevor Siemian lost a fumble and threw 2 interceptions in relief of Zach Wilson. That Jets offensive line completely no-show. There was a report before the game Aaron Rodgers might be medically cleared this week to return on play on Christmas Eve. It's not going to happen. He shouldn't want to come back watching that offensive line today. It'll be he could play, but he won't play. We've discussed this, the whole Aaron Rodgers ordeal. I love Aaron Rodgers. I do. He's one of the best quarterbacks of all time. Truth to power, I love all that stuff, but is he going to come back and play? No. But the Dolphins rebounded after a brutal loss to the Titans. Their defense stepped up. They couldn't have played much better. They got through the game, no major injuries. All you can ask for, and you prepare for Dallas next weekend. Can't wait to watch that one. Some performances today. If I had to give out a game ball today to somebody, just from their performance, who played the best today, my game ball goes to Baker Mayfield Jr. III of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who certainly had his best game of the season. I expect him to win NFC Player of the Week. 22 for 28, 381, 4 touchdowns. Plus 4 touchdown passes to 4 different receivers. How do you like that? Chris Godwin led the team in receiving by a mile, but he didn't have a touchdown. 10 for $155 today, also a career high for Chris Godwin. Baker was locked in. He was in the zone. The Packers couldn't stop him. They kept playing soft coverage. He kept finding people. Rachaad White went 21 for 89 yards rushing today. He was awesome. But Baker Mayfield, despite the fact that he was sacked 5 times, you showed why you kind of root for Baker Mayfield, and you kind of look and you kind of squint and go, he's a pretty good quarterback. He could be your guy moving forward. He has the guts. He has the moxie. His teammates seem to really like him. He finds Mike Evans in the end zone for his 11th receiving touchdown of the year. Chris Godwin have a great connection. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, to me, are the best team in a really bad NFC South. They still have remnants of that Super Bowl team. Levante David was awesome today for the Buccaneers. His tackles in open space. 7 total, sack and a half. He was just phenomenal. Winfield had 8 tackles and a forced fumble. And Vita Vea was all over the place. Didn't have many tackles, but he was, kept breaking through, getting pressure on Jordan Love. It was a massive game because not only does it help Tampa in their hunt to win the NFC South, but also helps them in the wild card if they lose some games down the stretch. And normally you see a team like Tampa who plays in warm weather go to Green Bay in late December and lay an egg. But they kept going on 6-minute, 7-minute drives, and Green Bay could do nothing about it. Sack him on second down. He comes up with a big play on third down to pick up the yardage. Chris Godwin and his yak, that's all he's doing, yak yards, yards after catch, yards after catch. Go into Green Bay in the frozen tundra and find a way to win. To me, at the very least this year, I expect Tampa to win their division. They might not, could easily not happen because it's the NFL. But they close against the Jags, home to the Saints, and at the Carolina Panthers. I think at the very least they go 9-8. But to me, he's earned the right to be a starting quarterback somewhere. Whether that's going to be in Tampa or not, it remains to be seen. But watching some of the guys this year, he's about mid-level quarterback in the NFL. He's better than most. Another NFC South guy, Derek Carr, who hasn't had a great year in New Orleans. And I don't think the fans love him, and he hasn't played that well. He's battling about 80 injuries. He was great today. 23 for 28, 218, 3 touchdowns, didn't turn the ball over. And the Saints had their first game in a long time where their offense and their defense played well simultaneously. They went after Tommy Cutlets, a.k.a. Tommy DeVito, whose agent was on the sideline with his little fedora on and big spectacle, and it's a great story on Monday night. But it's kind of over. Tommy DeVito was sacked 7 times today by the Saints. He left the game briefly. He did not throw a touchdown. Credit to him, he did not turn the ball over after getting hit that much. But the Saints just went after Tommy DeVito. Capacinoan had 3 sacks. Breesy, the rookie from Clemson, had 2. Granderson, who I love, had 1. They took it to him. And that's where you watch the Saints and go, that could be a team. They're 7-7. They got at the Rams next weekend, at the Bucks, home to the Falcons. Somebody's going to win the NFC South, and it's not going to be the Falcons. It's going to be the Saints or it's going to be the Buccaneers. To me, the Saints and the Buccaneers both have better defenses than the Falcons. And Baker Mayfield and Derek Carr have their limitations, but they're both better than the god-awful Desmond Ridder. But the Saints did not have Chris Olave today, who's an all-pro, did not have Michael Thomas, and they won 24-6. And yes, the Giants' offensive line is horrible, but they have players who can get after the quarterback. And when they're paired correctly, they are threatening. So today's slate of 2 o'clock games were about the NFC South. Keeping tabs on it. Watching the Bucs continue to pull ahead. Watching the Buccaneers defense force Jordan Love into bad throws and affecting his footwork. Which happened about 3 times today where he missed guys he should have hit for touchdowns because they were all over him. Affecting his pocket mobility and making him uncomfortable. Tough loss for Green Bay. Let's look at the standings in the NFC. Currently, we got the Vikings and the Rams in the wild card spots, both at 7-7. You have the Saints just on the outside looking in at 7-7. Then you have the Seahawks, Falcons, and the Packers go from 3-7 today with that one loss. Giants and Bears are pretty much out of it now. Seahawks still have to play this week. They play tomorrow at home against the Eagles. Like I said, for the Cowboys, it doesn't really matter. They're going to be the 5th seed at the very least. Eagles are wounded. Jalen Hurts may not play tomorrow night on Monday Night Football. He's nursing. He's under the weather, like the Cowboys. It might be Marcus Mariota in Seattle in a battle of dual backup quarterbacks with Marcus Mariota and Drew Lock doing battle. So who the hell knows? But if they play the Bucs, who they beat last year in the playoffs, or if they play the Saints, I don't think they're worried. But the Vikings, it's so funny. The Vikings lose on Saturday. In a game that they should have won about 3 times, to get stuffed twice on quarterback sneaks, despite the fact that Chandler was running the football so effectively the whole day. But yeah, let's go for a quarterback sneak with our unathletic quarterback. They lose a game and they stay in the second wildcard position. They stay right there. Vikings with their 4th quarterback, Nick Mullins, they close against the Lions next week at home. Home to the Packers, at Detroit. Not easy. Rams, they just beat the Commanders. Home to the Saints on Thursday. So that's the Thursday night game. Really important game this week. At the Giants, at Tommy Cutlets. And they close at the 49ers, which could be an important game for the 49ers, or it could be they've already locked up the 1 seed. We shall see. I don't know. I think the Vikings could lose their final 3 games. I really think the way they play. I love Jordan Addison and Justin Jefferson, the pair. I think Kirk Cousins is up for a contract. They might bring him back, they might not. If I'm a quarterback and I'm looking around, I'd love to play for the Vikings. I don't want to live in Minnesota because it's cold as hell, but I love those 2 receivers, and I love TJ Hawkinson, and they always seem just to find a running back. And I think Kevin O'Connell's a decent coach, good offensive mind. I think he's a player-friendly coach. That would excite me. They need to help their defense. They need to do certain things, sure. But if I'm just a quarterback, I want to play for that team because they have better weapons than half the league. Like Stafford. Half the reason the Rams are 7-7 is because Stafford's got good weapons, or Tutu Atwell, Cooper Kupp, Tyler Higbee. They're fun. Like Justin Fields. If he went to the Vikings, be fun. Be good. I'm sure Kyler Murray would love to play for the Vikings. If they could find another veteran quarterback to bring in, I don't think a rookie's the right way to go. But that'd be a good situation. It'd be a great situation for a quarterback to go play there. Fortunately for them, they played Jaren Hall this year, Kirk Cousins, the Pastronaut, Josh Dobbs, and Nick Mullins. They're on their fourth guy. And eventually just kind of run out of gas. It was a game yesterday they had to win. And they didn't. And then you see them lose, and Detroit goes out and spanks the Broncos. Whereas I'm thinking about it, Baker Mayfield doesn't win NFC Offensive Player of the Week. It's because Jared Goff will. Jared Goff, 24 for 34, 278, 5 touchdowns. And Sam Laporta might go down as the best rookie tight end in NFL history just this season. Had 3 receiving touchdowns yesterday. And another rookie, Jahmyr Gibbs, only ran the ball 11 times, but he averaged 9 yards a carry. And David Montgomery averaged 5 yards a carry. Now, why Jahmyr Gibbs is not touching the ball more, I shouldn't quibble in a game you win by 20. But why Ben Johnson? He's a rookie. I don't give a shit. Put the ball in his hands. The kid's electric. David Montgomery should never have more carries. Ever. Period. End of story. But I love their team. I love Laporta. 758 yards this year as a rookie, 71 receptions, 10 yards per catch, and 9 touchdowns. 9 touchdowns as a rookie. And he can do it all. And Detroit's 10-4 and still in the mix. Still in the mix, because if Goff doesn't turn the ball over, they finish at Vikings, at Cowboys, host the Vikings. Can they finish 13-4? Can they beat the Cowboys at the Cowboys? Tall task. 49ers win again today. They're 11-3. They clinched the NFC West. Since their bye week, they've been an absolute machine. They put up another 45 points. McCaffrey had 3 touchdowns. Brock Purdy threw for 4. The MVP of the league. We're at that point where the conversation can be had, and you start to have that conversation for real. Who's the MVP of the NFL? Dak Prescott. Then I heard Dan Orlovsky said Josh Allen, which, again, don't understand that. Don't see it. It tells you it's a bad year for an MVP if he wins it. That's just straight dope. But I don't know. Who's the MVP of the league? I would think that would be Brock Purdy, the favorite, right now. But at the same time, Brock Purdy's the game manager. All the players on his team are better than him. He had Tyreek Hill enter the conversation. Well, Tyreek Hill didn't play today, and the Dolphins won 30-0. So that hurts his chances. Dak Prescott just lost by 30 points, and he didn't throw for 150 yards. It's tough. Josh Allen didn't throw over 100 yards, and his team won, but James Cook was the more important. His offensive line was more important. So Josh Allen, not in the conversation, but he's kind of pushed to the side. So it seems by default that Brock Purdy is the leading guy right now. He's the front runner. Trying to find this on FanDuel. But it's a year where you don't feel like anybody deserves it. I think Brock Purdy's been superb. I think he's been great. But at the same time, I go, well, who's really doing this? Who's the more important piece? And to me, it's strange. I don't know. Because I almost look at it and go, Brock Purdy is great, but Christian McCaffrey is the better player, which I believe. And Christian McCaffrey is more important than Brock Purdy, which I also believe. But right now, Brock Purdy is the favorite, followed by Lamar Jackson, Dak Prescott, Jalen Hurts. Christian McCaffrey is fifth. You have Tua on that list. I don't think it's set yet, but the way the season's going, the way the 49ers have looked, it'll be hard for Brock Purdy not to win the award unless he completely self-destructs down the stretch. The one thing I could see is if Tua beats the Cowboys, beats the Ravens, and beats the Bills in the last game of the season, maybe he gets some love. If they somehow stumble their way into the number one seed in the AFC, and I don't think they'll win those 3 games, but if it does happen, and he plays really well, doesn't have many interceptions, they play great football, I think Tua will be thrown into the mix. But to hear with the MVP of the league is like, I don't know. Just seems to be Brock Purdy by default. I've said Tyreek the last couple of weeks. I don't think the MVP this year should be a quarterback because there's no quarterback deserving. McCaffrey, Tua didn't play. Tyreek didn't play this week. McCaffrey jumps to the top of the line. McCaffrey has been such a difference maker for the San Francisco 49ers. He's their biggest weapon, hands down. He's rushed for almost 1,200 yards this year, 12 touchdowns, and he's got 5 receiving touchdowns. Close to 300 touches so far this season. $8 yards per catch, 5 yards per catch running. He just does it all. Today, 18 for $115, 1 touchdown, 5 for 72, 2 touchdowns. Led his team in catches, led his team in receiving yards, led his team in carries, led the team in rushing yards. He did it all. As they put up a quick 45 on the Arizona Cardinals. Brock Purdy's polarizing. I think he's better than most. I don't think he's a Mac Jones. I don't think he's just he can make the throws. He's surgical. He doesn't need all the credit. That's one thing I'll say about him. I think he's very quiet. He plays great football. Deebo Samuel and him are starting to have a better connection as Deebo had another 2 receiving touchdowns today. But they got the best record in the league. They've beaten everybody. They've beaten all their tough opponents, really. They've gone through their tough patch. They got the Ravens next week at home, the final day of Christmas Day. They then go at Washington, and they close against the Rams. Not a brutal schedule down the stretch. Ravens is a tough game. Unless the Ravens lose tonight to the shorthanded Jaguars, it'll be the 2 teams with the best record in each conference playing each other on Christmas Day, which of course will trump whatever game it is that day for the NBA at that time of night. But normally MVP is a big topic of conversation because it was Jalen Hurts versus Patrick Mahomes last year, and it came down to the wire. And Mahomes ended up winning it. But to me, it's not a big discussion this year because I think it's a weird subject. Brock Purdy's going to win the award, and he's on the best team, but he's on a team full of all-stars. He's on a team where one of the best tight ends in the sport, and the best running back in the sport, and the best left tackle in the sport. So, is he that good, or is he on the team full of great players? I think it's a mix of both. But it's a quarterback award, normally, 99.9% of the time. I'll make this prediction now. I think if Brock Purdy is in line to win the award because it goes to a quarterback and he's the only one that makes sense, it'll go to a positional player. If nobody steps up over the next 3 weeks to join the conversation, to be in the mix, and Lamar, who's second in voting or second in odds, he could do it. Because you get the Jags tonight, then you play the 49ers in Santa Clara next weekend. And then you play the Dolphins. She'll have your opportunities to be superb, to be in the limelight, to show that you're MVP. Get the number 1 seed in the AFC and win your second MVP of your career. But if there's not a quarterback that steps up to join the conversation, I think Christian McCaffrey or Tyreek Hill will win the award. It'll be a positional player. Because I don't think Brock Purdy has done enough from NFL media to warrant getting the award. But there's no argument to be made for a quarterback other than Brock Purdy to win the award at this time. The Josh Allen argument is beyond stupidity. I don't want to hear it. Lamar has been good, not great. Dak Prescott's been very good, but in the biggest games, you could argue, he's gotten his ass kicked. And he lost to the Cardinals. That should... Ugh. Mahomes, no, hasn't had a good season. He's on a team that's very average. Jalen Hurts, again, hurt, turning the ball over a ton, not in consideration. Jared Goff, no. Too inconsistent, had about a 4-week period where he's one of the worst quarterbacks in the league. So, eventually you run out of people. And that's kind of what I'm coming to. Rest of the day, Browns edge the Bears. If the Bears are going to move off Justin Fields, today's another day to put on the big board, if you will. They have a 10-point lead in the fourth quarter and they lose the game. Can't happen. A couple weeks ago, they had a 10-point lead against the Lions and they lost. So it's happened twice this season for the Bears. You could say defense needs to stop, sure, but also when you get the ball back after it's not a 10-point lead anymore, you need to make a play, and it was a 3-and-out late in the game today for Justin Fields. So Cleveland wins. They survived the Hail Mary attempt. Joe Flacco, 3 interceptions, but he made the plays that he had to. Huge win for the Browns. They improved to 9-5. They are the 5th seed right now. They continue to find ways to win. 38-year-old Joe Flacco doing his thing out there. Credit to the Browns. Myles Garrett, that defense, Kevin Stefanski, they've overcome a lot. And getting a win today, I think you're going to get in. You're going to make the playoffs. You need to find ways to win a few of those games. And they're a game up of the Bengals, a game up of the Colts. And the Browns finish at the Texans, Jets at the Bengals. Can they get 2 or 3? I think certainly they can. Texans are not in a playoff spot as of right now, but they stay in the mix with the Bills by defeating Tennessee today. They're down big. No CJ Stroud, concussion protocol. Playing a division rival on the road. And they get a walk-off field goal in overtime by Fairbairn to win. We're looking around. No Tank Dell. No Nico Collins. No CJ Stroud. Dameon Pierce hardly touched the ball. Devin Singletary ran 26 times for $121 today. Didn't turn the ball over. Case Keenum started a football game in 2023, which is staggering. He did what he had, 20 for 36, threw a touchdown pass. And they found a way. Noah Brown, 8 for 82. Dalton Schultz, Singletary had 4 catches. And I thought at periods ago the Titans are going to win this game. Maybe the Titans can fight for the division. They couldn't run the football other than Will Levis. Will Levis got sacked 7 times. Threw an interception. And Houston just found a way. And sometimes that's just stay in the fight, stay in the mix. They had the Browns at home next weekend. CJ Stroud should be back. Difficult game because that Cleveland defense, they can get after the quarterback. But credit to Case Keenum. I thought Houston would have went with Davis Mills, who came in relief of CJ Stroud last week. Davis Mills, who was the starting quarterback last year. But they go to Case Keenum. They find a way to win. That defense came to play for D'Amico Ryans. They're 8-6, tied with the Bengals, with the Colts, and with the Buffalo Bills. And the Texans, Browns, home to the Titans, at the Colts to wrap up their season. All winnable games, but all potentially could be dangerous as well for the Houston Texans. And not to mention, you could still be in the mix because the Jaguars are 8-5. And the Jaguars have the Ravens tonight, and I'm worried about the Jags. Ravens tonight at the Bucks, Panthers, Titans. Back half looks easy, but you got a wounded Trevor Lawrence. Your team's getting more and more banged up. You're losing confidence. Curious to watch that game tonight. Let's see, what else did I miss today? Bears lose, Commanders lose to the Rams. Panthers beat the Falcons. The Falcons. Falcons in a game that you think's an easy win. Going on the road to play Carolina, who has 1 win on the season. You go up and put 7 points on Carolina. In a stadium that had about 100 people in it, and that's not an exaggeration. Nobody there. Nobody knows this game is happening. But you get the easiest opponent you could possibly have in your schedule down the stretch. You have Tampa in Green Bay today, tougher opponent. You have the Saints playing the Giants, tougher opponent. Desmond Ridder, 12 for 20, $152. Bijan Robinson had 7 carries. And he did fumble, and then he basically got in the doghouse for the rest of the game. Which, of course, Jonnu Smith led the team in receiving yards because why not? A backup tight end, sure. Drake London, who had like $180 receiving last year, only had 2 receptions today for 24 yards. I hate this team. They have so much talent and they never take advantage of it. They fall to 6-8. And today, I think, really screwed them. Colts, at Bears, at Saints. Colts aren't a gimme opponent. Colts can't come to play every week. Gardner Minshew is better than Desmond Ridder. At the Bears, New Year's Eve, that'll be freezing in Chicago for a dome team. Then at the Saints. Saints are better than the Falcons. They just are. Yes, the Falcons beat them earlier in the year. But we've seen a lot of firings in sports recently. We just saw Brandon Staley get fired. Earlier this year, what else do we? I think Eberflus is going to be fired in Chicago. Saints, if they miss the playoffs, I think they fired Dennis Allen. That's another coach that will be fired. I don't know about the Bucks. The Jets are a possibility. Titans, I don't see them firing Vrabel. Commanders are going to fire Ron Rivera. Packers, I think LaFleur is safe. But you have your head coach in Atlanta who's got a mustache, Arthur Smith, so I like him. I respect the fact that he's not afraid to have a mustache and be ridiculed, even though it looks fantastic. Happens occasionally. But he's had no success in Atlanta. Hasn't developed a quarterback. I think they've drafted well. They just don't know how to scheme it. Their offense stinks. They get 7 points in a game they have to win in Carolina in front of 100 people. It simply can't happen. You need to win that game. It's an inexcusable loss. You can win a division. You should make the playoffs despite the fact that you should never make the playoffs because it's an NFC South. But Tampa goes on the road and wins today. Wins in Green Bay. And yes, Green Bay aren't what they used to be, but it's still Green Bay in December. And they whoop Green Bay's ass. Kick their tail. And Atlanta puts up 7 against Bryce Young and the Carolina Panthers. I can't even imagine going to this game. Bryce Young, $167, sacked 3 times. He fumbled. Ugh. Gross. Falcons are done. Arthur Smith might be done. Thinking about it, Atlanta, Bears. Just going through this quickly. Coach is going to be fired. Washington. I don't think they'll fire Daboll. Arizona first year, no. Carolina already has. So Carolina, add Carolina because they need a new coach. Seahawks, no. I'm going to say Saints, yes. I'm going to say Dennis Allen, yes, because I think the Bucks and Baker Mayfield, my boy, are going to win the division. Vikings, no. Dallas, probably not. Lions, no. Eagles, no. San Francisco, no. Patriots, yep. Belichick, gone. Chargers have already lost a coach. Add them. Titans, I think Vrabel stays. Raiders, they already have. Do they keep Pierce? But they're gone. Broncos won't fight. I'm going to skip a team. I'm going to come back to them in a minute. Bills, no. Texans, no. Colts, no. Bengals, no. Browns, no. Jags, potential. I think that's it. That's 8 head coaching openings. And I'm guessing for some of these, but I think it's going to happen. So that's 8 openings potentially this offseason. Are we going to have 9 with Mike Tomlin? Pittsburgh lost on Saturday, really got embarrassed against the Colts. They fall to 7-7. And I don't know where this is going to go. I still think Mike Tomlin's one of the best coaches in the NFL. And I think if he gets fired, he will be hired by one of these teams. And I think the Steelers' ownership are smart about who they are as football people. They know his value. They know what he brings to the table. But his teams aren't playing that hard. They haven't been able to find a quarterback. The defense have been a little bit underwhelming. And it's just time for a fresh start. Been there 17 years. Had a lot of success. He's never had a losing season. I think that's going to end. Because this team just fundamentally isn't that talented. They can't overcome the deficiencies. They finish home to the Bengals, at the Seahawks, at the Ravens. I think they'll lose all 3. So you finish 7-10. It'll be his first losing season in his coaching tenure. Kenny Pickett's not the answer. Mitch Trubisky is not the answer. I think a lot of players in that locker room are frustrated. George Pickens, top of the list. I like the outline of their team. TJ Watt's one of the best players, not just best players in the NFL. It's a tough decision because you're moving off somebody you know is successful. It's the same as Bill Belichick in New England. Who are you going to hire that's a better coach than that person? And I don't think Tomlin's been running drafts and making player picks like Bill Belichick has for the last 30 years. So it might be time for a new GM in Pittsburgh, a new evaluator of quarterbacks. But optically, it's weird right now. It's a weird feeling. If Belichick and Tomlin were both on the market, that would be something else. 2 men have been pillars of success, pillars of normality in the respective markets available to the public. Which one would be hired for the Chargers job? Which one would go to Washington? Would the Bears want to hire one of these guys? I'm reading into this, but I do think the Steelers could be added to that list, which would make 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 9 head coaching openings. Because I think all these are going to end up being true. I think the Saints will fire Dennis Allen. Ron Rivera's fired. Chargers have already done it. I do think Bill Belichick's done in New England. The Bears are going to fire Matt Eberflus. Atlanta will fire Arthur Smith. Tough decisions will have to be made. Because you can't be 6-8 and you can't go on the road in front of 100 people in Carolina and lose 9-7. You don't allow a touchdown the whole game, but you're an offensive-minded head coach that can only put up 1 touchdown the whole goddamn day. With Drake London and Kyle Pitts and Bijan Robinson. And Bijan Robinson touches the ball 7 times. I just said what happened. It's almost perplexing. You can't even understand. It makes no sense. It's like trying to teach a fucking monkey long division. You're like, what the hell just happened? It did. An interesting day in the NFL. In about 10 minutes, Baltimore and the Jaguars are going to start playing, which is an important game for both sides. Baltimore's a 4-point favorite on the road in Jacksonville. Trevor Lawrence is going to have one of those nights where he goes, I was the first overall pick. I'm still great. I might have a bad ankle, but I can still throw the pill. But night for that tonight to be that night. But I would take Baltimore -4 tonight. Next podcast will be Tuesday, so we will not be talking tomorrow. Monday Night Football is Eagles at the Seahawks. My friend Emily's going to the game, so have fun. I'm jealous. I mentioned Jalen Hurts. Under the weather. Been banged up all year. Seattle's got a tough crowd, but also it sounds like Geno Smith's not going to play. It's going to be Drew Lock for the second straight week. Eagles are a 3-point favorite on the road. So 2 road favorites the next 2 games in the NFL. Eagles need this game. Important for them. They got Seahawks. I know they got the Giants twice down the stretch, including Christmas Day. So they go Seahawks, Giants, Cardinals, Giants. I think they have the easiest schedule remaining. They can beat the Seahawks tomorrow. They are smooth sailing. And they'll at least have a punching chance of being with San Francisco to have the top seed in the NFC. San Francisco does have to play Baltimore. But I would take Philly. They got punched in the mouth the last couple of weeks. I think they respond tomorrow. They might not play great, but they'll get a win in Seattle and start to prepare for the game against the Giants on Christmas Day. This weekend in the NHL, Thomas Tatar was traded from the Colorado Avalanche to the Seattle Kraken as the trade freeze is approaching. Patrick Laine was injured Thursday against the Maple Leafs. He's out for 6 weeks in a really weird injury. But he's becoming an injury-prone player. Columbus is a disaster. Adam Fantilli was on the 4th line last night. We talk about them a lot. They rule in incompetency. Winnipeg put a beating on the Colorado Avalanche. They are playing well. Mark Scheifele, both ends of the ice, tight checking group. That was a really impressive performance from Winnipeg last night. They can continue to play that way, build on it. If they can play that style without Kyle Connor, they will be fine and be in a position to still be in the mix when he returns. Not to mention, Jake Ottinger left the game for Dallas on Friday night. Sounds like he's going to miss some time. So Dallas could be, they're going to be with a backup goaltender for the foreseeable future. Kyle Dubas returned to Toronto last night. Big return, spectacle, Dubas, lots of hoopla. And his team played so hard for him. They gutted it out. And they managed to only lose 7-0. With Austin Matthews not playing because he's sick. Martin Jones, the 3rd-string goalie, in net. And they got pummeled. Just completely destroyed. Chris Letang was god-awful. Erik Karlsson was a no-show. Sidney Crosby's been fantastic all year. Did not have a good night. Max Domi was great, stepping up in a bigger role. He played fantastic. Mitch Marner, Nyes, Nyland, everybody was on the score sheet. It was a party for the Maple Leafs. They poured it on the Penguins. Penguins looked old. Penguins looked lethargic. Maple Leafs are young, vibrant, regular season ready, and they dominated. Matthew Nyes with the Gordie Howe hat trick. I picked the Maple Leafs to win the President's Trophy before the season started. Maple Leafs are 5 points back of the Bruins with a game in hand after David Pastrnak was ejected from the game last night for no fucking good reason. That's a whole other show. Maple Leafs are chugging. They're playing good hockey. They're becoming more and more confident. They look good on the ice. Since I called out Marner, he's starting to play better, so you're welcome, Leafs fans. Their only thing right now is their goaltending. Joseph Woll's out until TBD. If on the Maple Leafs, it's not on the Leafs just to start Ilya Samsonov because he was the goalie last year. They played Tuesday night against the Rangers, who they beat last Tuesday, and guess who was in the net? Martin Jones. Tuesday night, Martin Jones should be the starting goaltender. Martin Jones was in the NHL all of last year. Martin Jones was on a team that made the playoffs in the Seattle Kraken. Martin Jones is like this 96th or 97th most starts all time in the NHL, and that's, look it up, it's a fact. He's not some scrub. The fact that they got him for the money that they did and got to put him in the AHL is awesome, and the fact that nobody claimed him is alarming. I talked about this. I couldn't believe that nobody did. He's a good goalie. Big reason why Seattle made the playoffs last year. Him and Grubauer were a good tandem, and they ultimately got to the second round. He can keep you competitive. He can keep you in games. And he should start on Tuesday. Samsonov let in 6 against Columbus. He let in some bad goals. The team played dreadful in front of him. But them's the breaks. Sometimes the team plays like crap in front of you because they're tired and you got to find a way to overcome it. But you're looking around going, you played 4 less games in Tampa and you lead them by 5 points. You have played 2 more games in Florida and you're tied with them in the standings. 4 more points in the Red Wings, 2 games in hand. I mean, you're in a good spot. The Maple Leafs. Senators are not. They're playing tonight in Vegas. They're already down 1-0. Jack Eichel put one home. I think it's the final game of the road trip tonight. They were in St. Louis, crushed. In Dallas, you lose a game, just bad hockey. Ottawa's next game after tonight. No, they play in Arizona on Tuesday. So the road trip's not over. They got one more game on the road trip out west. And then they go to Colorado. Pardon me, I'm wrong. They got a couple more games out west. Jesus, that's not fun. So they got a number of games out west to come. They're back at home Saturday against Pittsburgh. DJ Smith's getting time. They're not panicking. He's great. We all love him. Blah, blah, blah. Crap I don't care about. They lose tonight in Vegas. They got a couple days. I don't know if he's sticking around. It's tough to fire somebody right before Christmas. But he's going to be paid the rest of the year, so it's not that sad. He'll get his check. I'm sure he's already bought his gifts. Andlauer wants to give him time. I get it. But your team is 11-14. Your team is last in the Eastern Conference. Your team is underperforming, and your team's going to miss the playoffs again. So why not just start making changes now? I think it will happen. I think very well if Ottawa loses tonight, there will be a firing in the NHL tomorrow, and it'll be DJ Smith. Because you just can't keep going this way. They got a tough road trip. I get it. But you got St. Louis with a new coach. You got Dallas with a backup goaltender. And now you get Vegas. Vegas is tough, but the other first 2 games, very winnable. And you didn't win either of them. Brady Kachuk is playing hard. Seems the only guy that seems to fucking care. Nobody else seems to really care that much about DJ Smith. Might be time for a reset. And if you're just going to wait till December 27th, then you lose the games you don't want to do it the week of Christmas. Optically, it's not that bad because I'm telling everybody, he still gets paid. Still getting paid until the end of the year, till April. Nice guy. I don't know if he's a head coach. He's never made the playoffs as a head coach. So that would tell me he's just not a head coach. Great assistant, not a head coach. I think we could see changes tomorrow if they lose tonight. UFC 296 with this weekend. It was phenomenal. Final UFC card of the year. Great year for the UFC. New champions. Crazy results. Awesome fights. Last night delivered. Start the show, 2 knockouts. Gaziev, heavyweight, improved to 12-0. Andre Fili, first round KO of Lucas Almeida with a beautiful right hand. Ariana Lipski dominated Casey O'Neill in the women's flyweights. Big, nasty armbar. Biggest win of her career. Former bantamweight champion Cody No Love Garbrandt, first round KO victory against Brian Boom Kelleher. Big victory for him. Then he calls out Davison Figueiredo, which I think the UFC should book now. We'll talk more about fights that they made on Tuesday. But Garbrandt against Figgy, 2 former champions, two guys that have power in their hands at bantamweight. I'm all for it. Love that matchup. Then we get Irene Aldana, Carol Rosa. To me, it was the fight of the night. Absolute war. Both women had to go to the hospital after the fight. Irene Aldana coming off a really bad performance against Amanda Nunes for the title in June. Left everything out there. Striking performance. Lost the first round. Comes back, wins the second and the third. She showed heart. She showed toughness. She got the decision. To me, is one of the best fights in UFC history when it comes to females. One of the best fights of the year. Irene Aldana edges Carol Rosa. Then we get Alonzo Menafield defeats Dustin Jacoby in the featured prelim. Menafield's on a bit of a run here. Another fun fight. That was all before the pay-per-view. Then we get to the pay-per-view. Josh Emmett, featherweight, lost 2 fights in a row to Yair Rodriguez and to Ilia Topuria. But he's tough as nails. Doesn't quit. 39. Fighting Bryce Mitchell. Thug nasty on short notice. Less than 2 minutes in, he landed 1 strike the entire fight to 1-punch KO. Nasty. Drops him. Bryce dropped like a sack of potatoes. He was convulsing. Was taken out of the cage before they raised hands because it was that bad. But Emmett has nasty power in the featherweight division. I don't know what they're going to do with him next. Max Holloway, Josh Emmett would be fun if Holloway wants to stay at 145. But Josh Emmett's still a factor. If he can catch them at the right moment, he can beat anybody. Josh Emmett. Then we get Paddy Pimblett, Tony Ferguson. Paddy Pimblett looked better, improved striking, but that gas tank's still an issue. He wore out. Still has holes in his game. I don't think he's beaten any of the top guys in the lightweight division. If Tony would have tried to get off his back in that fight, would have tried to get on the feet in the third round, I think he would have beat Pat. I think he would have finished him. But he did not fight intelligently. He gave Paddy the fight. And Tony lost his 7th straight fight despite the fact that David Goggins trained him. Who fucking cares? I don't think Tony looked awful. He's not going to retire because he can't do it anymore. I mean, he hung in there with Paddy Pimblett. But if he retires, I get it. 7 straight loss, which ties for longest streak in UFC history. I don't think he's going to retire on his own. I think it's going to be up to Dana White to do it for him. But Tony Ferguson is a draw. He remains a draw, and that's the problem here. We get to Shavkat Rakhmonov against Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. Learned after Shavkat had a torn ankle. Still goes in the fight completely he overpowers opponents. He gets them in the clinch, starts to wear on them until they try to escape, and he can get you into submission areas. He gets the rear naked choke on Stephen Wonderboy Thompson before the second round is over. Wonderboy taps. Shavkat improves to 18-0, 18 finishes, and is an absolute threat in their welterweight division. Now, they could give him the next title shot, absolutely, because he's been that dominant. He's been a scary dude the whole way through, and he's fresh in welterweight. Bilal Muhammad was the backup fighter. He's looking for a title shot. Gilbert Burns has got one. Colby just did. Usman. Shavkat against Leon Edwards would be fun. Leon's won 12 fights in a row. Shavkat's won 18 in a row, and he's finished them all. Can he finish the champion? I could see the UFC going in that direction. We get to the flyweight title. Alexander Pantoja won the title in July against Brandon Moreno. And he had a very successful first title defense. To me, he won all 5 rounds against Brandon Royval. Some judge, I think, gave him 4. I thought he won all 5 rounds. Striking was solid when he had to be. But to me, his biggest thing was his jiu-jitsu. Took Royval to the ground every round. He had opportunities to get a submission finish. But he was never in bad spots. Yes, he got tired toward the end of the fight, which he did against Moreno. That's going to continue to happen. But he's so crafty. When he's in bad situations, he can escape, get the fight to the ground where he is at his strengths. Pantoja's a scrapper. Pantoja's a smarter. He seems to be getting better and better every time he steps in the cage. He was in there with a very crafty Royval who wins via knockout, wins via submission. But there were levels. Pantoja is better. Brandon Moreno, Amir Albazi are going to fight in February in Mexico City. We could see a Moreno rematch against Pantoja. Could be Albazi. I think that will be the next fight for Pantoja. But I could see him getting some time off for the next couple months. Then we get to the main event. Colby Covington, Leon Edwards. Covington told Edwards on Thursday, I'm going to take you to hell on Saturday. You can say hi to your father while you're there. Leon's dad passed away tragically. But Colby Covington absolutely no-showed. Donald Trump was in the front row, cage side, and Colby Covington looked old and slow, like Dana White said in his press conference. For his first 2.5 rounds, he didn't want to fight his fight. He wanted to stand there and just have a sparring session, a shitty sparring session. He was getting touched up. Leon didn't have to do much. It was a boring, really boring fight. And he won the 5th round, but he only started fighting about, like I said, 2.5 rounds in. He wasn't aggressive. He wasn't doing anything. He looked slow. He looked behind. And it was Colby Covington losing his 3rd title fight in his UFC career. 2 to Usman, 1 to Leon Edwards. That's it. He shouldn't get another one. Him getting the title shot was stupid to begin with. It built up the fight. He did a good job of selling the fight, making people interested, creating a storyline. But he was garbage. He called out Wonder Boy. 2 older guys, they can fight, sure. I'm sure it'll do fine. Colby Covington is never going to get a title shot again. He honestly should consider retirement because he didn't look good on Saturday. He looked old and he looked slow. And no chance he gets another title shot because there's too many good welterweights. Not to mention in the crowd, Sean Strickland and Dricus du Plessis, who are fighting in Canada on January 20th, got into a full-on brawl. Strickland was ejected from the building. There's a lot of tension in that fight, making the Canada card even better. And the Canada card, which we'll talk about, is looking great for Toronto in January. So, fun stuff. What a weekend. One more week before Christmas. You can believe it. Got your gifts bought? Hope so, because you're running out of time. Tuesday we'll be back. Some baseball stuff I want to talk about that happened over the weekend that we didn't get to tonight. Recap the NFL, talk some NHL. There's some UFC fights announced last night that I'm going to save until Tuesday to talk about for that UFC 299 card in Miami. So that's all forthcoming. Have a great Monday. Have a great start to your week. We'll talk to you Tuesday. This is To The Point.